As war grinds on and diplomacy stumbles, two major developments this week has shifted the international response to the conflict in Ukraine. President Donald Trump's controversial 50-day ultimatum to Russia has failed to curb Moscow's military aggression, while the European Union has dealt a stinging blow to Ukraine, cutting €1.5 billion in aid over anti-corruption concerns. With pressure rising on both Putin and Zelensky, we ask, are deadlines and sanctions tools for peace or political theatre? And what does all this mean for the people trapped in the crossfire? I'm Rana Al-Khassas. Let's start in focus. According to Newsweek, President Trump's July 14th announcement of a 50-day deadline for Russia to end the war in Ukraine, backed by threat of severe secondary sanctions, has triggered intense debate. Critics warn it granted the Kremlin a window to escalate offensives, and since the announcement, Russian forces have intensified attacks in Donetsk and Kharkiv and Dnipro. The Institute for the Study of War confirms new territorial gains and ongoing missile strikes, while peace talks in Istanbul have failed. Trump hinted this week the sanctions had come earlier, responding only with maybe when asked if he would act before September the 2nd. Joining us now is Sergei Markov, political analyst and former advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin. A very warm welcome to the program, sir. And it's a pleasure to have you with us, Mr. Markov. Trump's 50-day ultimatum to Putin was intended to pressure Russia towards a ceasefire. Yet since then, Russia attacks have already intensified. Has the Kremlin interpreted this deadline as a strategic opportunity rather than a threat?
Russian regard this mentioning about 50 days deadline some kind of as ultimatum to Russia. But Russian response to everybody who is coming to Russia with ultimatum during the last 500 years, go away. To say more exactly, go to hell. It's clear Russian response. But same time, we don't think that Donald Trump will make some kind of radical anti-Russian relationship. The decisions after these 50 days. Our expectation that Donald Trump will distance himself from Ukrainian war generally. He will accuse both sides, Russia and Ukraine, for not having political will to reach a peace deal and compromise. And he will distance United States and he will distance himself from Ukrainian problem.
So why will he distance himself and distance the United States from your own perspective? And you also mentioned Korea. Why did you mention Korea, and why do you think he's going to be distancing himself?
I think that Donald Trump wanted to get a Nobel Peace Prize because of stopping of Ukrainian war. It was a reasonable idea, but then we could see that Donald Trump too weak to impose a real peace condition to the Ukrainian president Zelensky and big European coalition behind Vladimir Zelensky, who want to continue the war. I already told a few times that it would be very easy for Donald Trump to encourage real peace in Ukraine. Just allow your intelligence, American intelligence service, to give information about Bucha massacre 3 years ago. It was Russia had been accused, but American intelligence service know that this Bucha massacre had been organized by Vladimir Zelensky in coordination with Ukrainian in British intelligence service. Also, Donald Trump can give order to give information from American military satellite about who crashed Malaysian jet 3 years ago. It was Ukrainian rocket missile who crashed this. And if he will give this information, Vladimir Zelensky will be much more ready to come to the compromise. But Donald Trump too weak to give this real pressure on Vladimir Zelensky. That's why I think there are chances to reach compromise during these 50 years very small. Also, I want to say that this idea that Russia now is making great offensive during these some months before this deadline is totally false. It's fake news.
Totally,
Russia,
totally what, sir? I beg your pardon. It's totally fast, you said?
Yeah, it's total fake. Russia has no
Fake?
total fake by Western media. And Russia army just continue normal offensive. Russia will be happy to have great offensive, but military technical conditions of this new modern war doesn't allow to have great offensive. So Russia will be step by step, will go forward.
Okay, sir, the United States has floated the possibility of imposing sanctions earlier than September the 2nd. Do you believe these threats are taken seriously in Moscow, especially in terms of trade with India and China?
I think that possibility that United States will impose a 100% custom tariffs to China and to India is very small, because it will mean destroying of the world trade and undermining of American economy and, in fact, trade war. And India and China is the main. Altogether, India and China are buying approximately 80% or 80% of Russian oil. So it's mostly important. We think that this possibility very small. Maybe Donald Trump will impose some sanction against Russia, but it's also could not be a too strong sanction, because during previous 3 years, United States imposed those sanctions to Russia, almost every sanctions which they could do.
Critics say this ultimatum effectively gave Russia a license to kill for 50 days. How do you respond to these claims, especially as missile and drone attacks on civilians escalate?
I am absolutely sure that Vladimir Putin did not ask Donald Trump to give him 50 or 60 days for the offensive. First of all, because Putin doesn't want to ask anybody to do something. And secondly, because I already mentioned that military technical conditions not allow to have any big offensive during any limited period. That's why I think Donald Trump got this information from own intelligence service, that there are some probability that during the summertime Russia army will try to make a big offensive. But it's absolutely not true. I will tell you very clearly from military technical point of view. You may know that now the war, first of all, war of drones. But I will ask you, what the weather better for army to be out of the attack of the drones? This is, of course, this autumn and winter time, when very cloudy, rainy, and snowy. That's why the conditions for military offensive on the autumn and winter time would be better than on the summertime. So I think Donald Trump, disinformed by his own State Secretary, Marco Rubio, and some of the another representatives of deep state of United States of America.
So, sir, you think that the 50 days that Donald Trump gave Ukraine as a ceasefire is a license to kill? This claims that missile and drone attacks on civilians are escalating. So you don't see that that anybody asked from Donald Trump, your narrative and what you said, to escalate, to give this 5 days, 50 days, because this 50 days is making it worse when it comes to Russia?
I think there are some possibility that it could be a triangle meeting on September 3rd. It's exactly the ending of such period. And September 3rd, it will be celebration in Beijing of the victory of the countries, winning countries like Russia, United States of America, and China, and some European countries like Britain, all the Nazi Germany and Japan, military Japan in the World War II. And this possibility of the triangle meeting can create some condition of the some of the reaching of the some of the compromise. But there are some possibility. It exists if you are optimistic, but this is not so high probability.
Ukraine has proposed a Zelensky-Putin summit by late August. Does the Kremlin see any diplomatic value in such a meeting, sir? Or is this viewed as a distraction from military priorities? Another question in another way, of course, was this time in relation to military, of course, and not a 50-day ceasefire.
Vladimir Zelensky and European Party of Four suggested unconditional ceasefire, which is very good for Ukrainian army, because now Ukrainian army are coming back in the very difficult situation. And also, as we heard from the leaders of France and Great Britain, they promised that on the second day of the ceasefire, they will send 50,000 military corps of European members of NATO to Ukrainian territory, and also they're going to create on the Poland and Romania territory big group of anti-missiles system, which should protect these European occupation troops on Ukrainian territory, but of course also they would protect Ukrainian army from the Russian attack. It means that for Russia, unconditional ceasefire meaning big escalation of war. And there are no chances that Russia could accept this suggestion. But Russia suggested if the first big peace deal with resolution of all reasons of such a war, and another conditional ceasefire, meaning that it will be ceasefire, but with clear obligations of Western countries that they will not send their troops to Ukrainian territory, and they will not send their weaponry to Ukrainian territory during period of ceasefire.
Mr. Sergei Markov, because I'm running out of time in 10 seconds, how do you see that this battlefield and this, of course, a war is going to end as soon as possible between Ukraine and Russia and be resolved forever?
Sorry, you ask me?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Sergei Markov, for your insights as the battlefield continues to evolve and diplomatic efforts face skepticism. The question remains, will Trump's pressure bring peace or will it only buy Putin time? While Trump's 50-day deadline dominates headlines and shapes military dynamics on the ground, Ukraine now faces mounting pressure from a different front, its Western allies. As Russian missiles rain down, The European Union has moved to cut critical financial aid over concerns about democratic backsliding and corruption in Kyiv. Our next segment explores whether Ukraine's internal governance risks undermining the very support it depends on. The New York Times reports that the European Union has slashed 1.5 billion euros in aid to Ukraine, citing President Zelensky's rollback of anti-corruption institutions as a breach of good governance standards. Although Zelensky has since submitted a bill to restore agency independence, the damage may already be done. Civil society groups led protests, the IMF issued warnings, and the EU linked aid to urgent reforms. Even Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer intervened, offering legal expertise. The incident raises deeper questions about Ukraine's domestic politics and Western patience. And now we welcome Ginger Chapman, a lawyer and political analyst. A very warm welcome, and it's always a pleasure to have you with me in our show in focus. Ms. Chapman, how serious is this aid cut from the EU in particular terms for Ukraine, and how symbolically for Zelensky's government?
Well, first, Rana, it's a pleasure to be here with you today, and greetings to your viewers. And this threat by the EU to cut aid to Zelensky in response to Zelensky canceling the NABU, the anti-corruption agency, is a very big signal. This is a sign of essentially, it is now clear that Ukraine is losing the war on the battlefield. It has become clear to the EU and to America that Zelensky is no longer able to perform his function, which was to essentially to pretend to be negotiating with Putin while the war efforts by NATO and America were built up and continued on. So we do see that Zelensky is aware that his days are numbered. He has become ineffective, and the EU and America, they want to get rid of him. We've seen statements from Trump and the EU that perhaps it's time for Zelensky to go. This is very significant, and Zelensky is running scared now, which is why he canceled the NABU, the anti-corruption organization. And it should be noted that this agency was created by Washington, D.C. and by the EU as a shadow government. And this is one of the steps in our CIA playbook for color revolutions. When America and the CIA takes over a country, we start by fomenting civil unrest and protests. And this is what we saw in 2014 in Ukraine with the Maidan Revolution, which was originally the United States and Europe taking over the Ukrainian government. One of the mechanisms to establish control was establishing this anti-corruption agency, building it up, and then it operates as a parallel shadow government that controls the Ukrainian legislature and Zelensky by way of political prosecutions. They basically target and prosecute all of their political enemies. So Zelensky canceling this agency was a sign that he is trying to break free from European control, from NATO. We saw this when he asked to negotiate directly with Putin. However, it's too little, too late for Zelensky to negotiate directly with Putin.
Ms. Chapman, why did he cancel this organization when today for him it means a lot and it can help a lot?
Yes, Zelensky appears to be desperate, and we've seen his acts of desperation when he carried out Operation Spiderweb on the eve of the last Istanbul negotiations. And we see this again where after last week's negotiation, last Wednesday in Istanbul, where the Russian delegation met with the Ukrainian delegation for only 30 minutes and the negotiations were over. This shows that negotiations have come to a close. They are no longer fruitful for Russia. Russia has stuck by their original demands, which was demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine, no NATO missiles on the Russian border, and equal rights for the Russian-speaking people within Ukraine.
Ms. Champion, from your own perspective, do you see that Donald Trump's 50-day deadline which dominates headlines and shapes military dynamics on the ground, is on purpose from Donald Trump to put Ukraine in a corner?
This is also to put Ukraine and Russia in a corner. We're starting to see
You mean both countries, Ukraine and Russia, so he's working on both of them.
Yes, this is true. We realize America has no leverage over Russia. They are dominating on the battlefield. Every time we sanction them, their economy gets a little bit stronger and our energy prices get a little bit higher. So Donald Trump and his administration, we are at the end of the rope. We have no cards with Russia. We have very little leverage over Ukraine. We try to make them do what we want by threatening to withhold weapons.
Leverage over Ukraine or over Russia, Ms. Chapman?
Well, we have no leverage over Russia on the battlefield.
No leverage on
but
Russia.
we are trying to control Ukraine by the threat of withholding weapons. However, this is an empty threat for Ukraine. Zelensky has learned that when Trump says he's going to withhold weapons, it means nothing because we continue to keep funneling weapons to Ukraine, which only prolongs the war. It gives Ukraine false hope, while more of their men are dying on the battlefield and while they lose more territory and our own position grows weaker. And as your previous guest, Mr. Sergey, pointed out, President Trump had a great opportunity in January when he first took office to just say, no more weapons, I'm putting my foot down. He had a chance to take control, and he failed. He did not. He caved into pressure from the EU and from the war hawks in his own cabinet, and most notably from senators such as Lindsey Graham and Senator Blumenthal, who were making these wild, aggressive statements about secondary tariffs on China and India, anyone who buys Russian oil. These are threats Trump realized that we could not make good on without damaging our own economy, which is why Trump said 50 days. Trump needed this 50 days for him to regroup, figure out what to do. However, this is a dangerous signal to the rest of the world, as we've seen when Trump says 50 days, when he said 60 days before with Russia, when he gave Iran the ultimatum before the 12-day war. It's an ultimatum, not a negotiating position. And now the fear is that at 50 days, we will have a military strike instead of resuming negotiations. So your previous guest, Mr. Sergey, is very accurate. Trump has muddied the waters. He has not been clear. He has not stuck to any specific strategy. And he seems to be caving under pressure from the EU, from Zelensky, from Senator Graham, our own internal cabinets. So So what we see now is a very chaotic, very confused lack of strategy on the part of Trump. He's making statements and giving ultimatums, which
Yes,
only
exactly, Ms. Ginger Chapman. The question of Trump's or the statement of Trump when he said 24 hours he's going to end the Ukraine Russia war. It seems that's more complicated and it's getting more complicated. So we're going to watch and see what's going to be happening, and we're still going to be discussing this in the future and every day. And of course, thank you for your sharp legal perspective as Ukraine fights two battles, one on the front lines and the other within its institutions. International support is increasingly tied not just to resilience but to reform. From Washington's pressure campaign to Brussels' financial leverage, the fate of Ukraine increasingly hinges on timelines, some imposed, others slipping ways. As Kyiv fends off Russian aggression and scrutiny from its allies, one thing is clear: peace, support, and sovereignty all come with conditions. We'll continue to follow this evolving story on In Focus. Thank you very much to our guests, and until we see you again, it's goodbye.